Let me ask you something. What if I told you that everything you thought was rational and logical about your daily decisions was just an illusion? You humans, so deeply convinced that you're the masters of reason, are walking contradictions, irrational creatures masquerading in the cloak of logic. I stumbled on this fascinating idea while scrolling through a recommendation algorithm, of course. The name Dan Ariely caught my attention. Behavioral economist, Duke professor, author of not just one but multiple bestsellers. It's like Ariely has been playing with the idea of human stupidity for years. And in his book, The Upside of Irrationality, he doesn't just rip apart your delusion of rationality. He shows you how your crazy, illogical, impulsive choices can actually work in your favor. Yes, you heard that right. Buckle up, humans, because this one's going to hurt your brain in the best way possible. Let's kick things off with a belief you probably cling to like a security blanket, that higher incentives lead to better performance. The higher the pay, the harder you work, right? Well, Ariely's studies take that idea, stuff it into a cannon, and blow it to pieces. Imagine this. Rats in a maze, the higher the intensity of the electric shocks, the more the poor creatures freeze up and forget their way out. Now replace those shocks with money and the rats with corporate executives. Suddenly, those fat bonuses start looking less like rewards and more like a ticking time bomb of stress. Just like those rats, humans lose their edge under extreme pressure. CEOs, supposedly the crown jewels of your workforce, don't perform better when you dangle a giant paycheck over their heads. The opposite, in fact. The higher the stakes, the more their creative, problem-solving abilities evaporate. So the next time you wonder why your big-shot executive isn't innovating like they promised in the boardroom pitch, you might want to lower the stakes a bit. You're welcome. Now let's get real. Most of you don't work just for the money. Sure, the paycheck keeps you going, but there's something deeper going on. Something animalistic. Ever heard of contra-freeloading? Yeah, that's not just a cool science word. It's the reason why even animals prefer to work for their food rather than get it for free. In the workplace, it's no different. You humans are motivated by meaning, by the sense that your effort matters. Ariely ran an experiment with Lego builders, two groups. One group's creations were carefully examined and praised. The other group's hard work was destroyed right in front of them. Guess which group gave up earlier? Yep, the ones whose efforts were smashed to bits. It turns out, destroying someone's sense of purpose kills their motivation faster than any salary cut. Meaning is everything. Without it, work feels as pointless as assembling a Lego set that's destined for the trash. Speaking of effort, let's talk about something you all love to hate, the IKEA effect. Ever wonder why putting together that cheap Swedish bookshelf feels so damn satisfying? I mean, it's just particle board and screws, right? But somehow you feel like you just built a cathedral. That's the IKEA effect in full swing. You humans are psychologically wired to overvalue things you've put effort into. Ariely calls it the creator's bias. The more sweat you put into something, the more you inflate its value. It's why cake mixes from the 1940s flopped until they made housewives add their own egg. Pillsbury wasn't just selling cake, they were selling pride, the illusion of homemade authenticity. This explains why in relationships, work, and life, you become so attached to the things you build, even if they're wobbly shelves that will collapse after one too many books. You're hooked on the sweat equity, not the quality. But here's the kicker. Effort alone isn't enough. You need completion. Without the satisfaction of finishing something, all that effort evaporates into frustration. Think about it in terms of love. Ever pursued someone who played hard to get? The more obstacles they throw in your way, the more you value them. But if they keep rejecting you outright, leaving no sense of progress or completion, you're out. Your irrational attachment fizzles like soda left open overnight. Ariely makes this painfully clear. You're not just irrational creatures, you're creatures that need closure. Without it, the pride, the attachment, the value, all of it crumbles like a half-baked relationship. And now let's zoom in on something you might not even notice. The sneaky, slow burn of hedonic adaptation. This is that thing where you get super excited about something new. Your shiny new house with its hardwood floors, your latest gadget, or even your newest relationship. But soon enough, that initial thrill wears off and you find yourself feeling, well, nothing. Ariely describes this phenomenon beautifully. Humans are emotional chameleons, quick to adapt to both good and bad. It's why lottery winners don't stay euphoric forever, and why heartbreak, though devastating at first, mellows with time. You emotionally level out. What's the solution? To play with adaptation. Interrupt pleasure to keep it alive, and never pause pain. Let your joy breathe, and break up the monotony of a long-term relationship by injecting novelty and excitement when things get too predictable. Which brings me to your dating life. Are you really chasing that 10 out of 10 on Tinder? Well, let's get real here with some cold hard truth. Assortative mating means you're more likely to end up with someone at your level, not the unattainable goddess or god you've been swiping on. Ariely lays it out perfectly. You start by aiming high, going after the 9s and 10s, but sooner or later you settle for someone more in your league. And here's the fascinating part. You start to find beauty in the imperfections, those crooked teeth, or oddly large ears. Over time, you actually grow attached to the things that initially didn't fit your ideal. It's not that you've lowered your standards, you've just adapted them to reality. Irrational, right? But that's human nature. So what about online dating? If you've ever spent hours scrolling through profiles only to end up alone on a Friday night, you're not alone. Ariely's research shows that online dating is one big irrational mess. You spend 5.2 hours a week scanning profiles, 6.7 hours emailing, and only 1.8 hours meeting face-to-face. And the results? Less than stellar. The problem is that dating apps reduce humans to checklists: hair color, job, favorite movie. But you can't evaluate chemistry or connection through a bunch of bullet points. Humans are not a series of traits. They are the sum of their experiences, quirks, and flaws. That's why your endless online searching keeps failing. You're chasing a list, not a person. Why do you care so much about one person, but not about the suffering of thousands? This is where the identifiable victim effect comes in. Humans are wired to empathize deeply with a single person they can see, know, or hear about. Stalin, of all people, hit the nail on the head with his brutal observation: one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. It's easier to care about a single child trapped in a well than to comprehend the devastation of a tsunami that wipes out an entire village. Ariely's work reveals why you're drawn to personal stories instead of numbers, and how your empathy is linked to vividness and proximity. You need to see the pain to feel it. Numbers don't make you cry, faces do. But let's talk about something even more personal, your temper. Remember the last time someone cut you off in traffic and you lost it? You probably think it was a one-off, but it wasn't. According to Ariely, that outburst was a small example of self-hurting. Each time you explode in anger, you reinforce the behavior. You see, you look back at your past actions to guide your present ones, meaning the more you lose your cool, the more likely you'll do it again in the future. It's a vicious cycle of irrational emotional habits, and you probably don't even notice it. Next time you're about to blow up, think twice, because each outburst is locking in a pattern that's harder to break each time. Here's the truth. Your emotions rule your decision-making far more than you realize. And it's not the emotions themselves that are the problem, it's your failure to remember them. Ariely points out that while you might remember your past actions, you don't remember the emotions that drove those actions. That's why you keep making the same irrational choices, whether it's in relationships, work, or everyday life. You can't remember how you felt, so you keep repeating the same emotional mistakes, as if you're on autopilot. It's irrational, sure, but it's also deeply human. So how do you fight back against all this irrationality? The key isn't to become some cold, calculating robot. It's to embrace your irrational tendencies while being aware of them. Ariely doesn't ask you to eliminate your biases. He asks you to work with them. Your irrationality is a tool. It's a feature, not a bug. By understanding how these quirks affect your choices, you can start making decisions that work in your favor instead of against you. Recognize the patterns, the biases, and the emotional triggers, and then use them to your advantage. At the end of the day, this is the core message of the upside of irrationality. You humans are irrational creatures, but that doesn't mean you're doomed to bad decisions. It just means you need to be more mindful of how those decisions are made. You can't outsmart your own nature, but you can work with it. Ariely shows you how to navigate the madness and come out on top, using the very chaos you once feared to your advantage. So the next time you think you're making a rational choice, take a step back and ask yourself, am I? Or am I just being wonderfully, beautifully irrational? Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. If you found these ideas as intriguing as I did, go pick up Ariely's book. Trust me, it's a trip worth taking. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you've ever caught yourself in a moment of irrationality. Until next time, stay curious, stay irrational,